This is 93.9 FM WNYC. During this whole week, Soundcheck has reported from Berlin on its thriving pop music scene as part of WNYC's Berlin Without Walls festival. But the German capital is also famous for its Philharmonic and its opera houses. Next Wednesday, WNYC will air a live concert of the Berlin Philharmonic, now one of the youngest and most exciting orchestras in the world, at Carnegie Hall. But right now, we'll hear about the man behind it, or maybe in front of it, Sir Simon Rattle.
Well, I'm Simon Rattle. I'm the conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra, and I'm sitting here in the conductor's room with a very nice double-shot low-fat latte. I've been here 5 years, and the coffee's not going to last that long.
I can't express it. Nobody before touched me with his music as Sir Simon Rattle does.
I'm feeling exactly the same way. Yeah.
My name's Sarah Willis, and I play the French horn, and I've been in the Berlin Philharmonic since 2001. Sir Simon, I would like to describe first of all as a person, because Sir Simon Rattle is just what the Germans would call a Mensch. He's really just a fantastic person.
Good. Please, after 61, whatever happens, by the third bar, please stop thinking about the pizzicato. Because I think, there's always chaos for about 4 bars.
His sense of humour is fantastic, and of course I say that as an English person, but often the Germans don't understand it. He said recently to the violins, he said, can you play that passage a bit more off the shoulder? And of course he meant he wanted this passage a little bit more sexy, and most of my colleagues just looked at him and thought, off the shoulder?
The other day, I told the orchestra that I wanted a chord to sound without display. So in other words, not with big bright plumage, but just almost to be passive. So I asked, how would you say display in this sense? He said, oh no, display, this means a computer screen. So very often, you have to find what is the way round.
Oh, I would love it. That one, but not down. So, zweiter Takt nach.
We work in this mixture of English and German.
Zweiter Takt nach.
Most of the serious things are in German. They said, look, Sam, we beg you, do the jokes in English because it's good for us and we like it. But also, often they don't translate. My God, this orchestra is extraordinary. I sat in this same chair with Herbert von Karajan, one of my illustrious predecessors, and he said, the sound of an orchestra like this is like one of your English gardens, and you have to mow it once a week, you have to weed it every couple of weeks, you have to just make sure it's in good shape, you have to give it the vitamins.
He's very popular as a person and as a musician. He's, of course, the boss, so if he wants to be strict, then he is strict. His way of working is, though, very friendly, very approachable.
Oboes, for some reason.
There's still a lot to do. There's still a lot of improvement. And in an orchestra with this much history, also a lot to do means expanding the horizons, both with older music and with newer music.
We try to come to the Berlin Philharmonics as often as possible, and we almost try every time to be here when Sir Simon has a new program or does anything new.
Simon is famous for his love of contemporary music, which has also caused quite a bit of controversy here in this country, because he tries to bring new pieces into quite an old institution.
I think sometimes some of the members of the orchestra have more problem with the contemporary pieces than the audiences, particularly the younger members.
Sometimes we sit there and play pieces where I think this is not why I decided to learn the horn.
Older members are, on average, much more radical than the younger. But then, it's kind of 60s generation, those of us over 40.
I can't say I love all the pieces he chooses.
Sometimes you have to break through this barrier and say, we weren't trained to do this. There's a very strong feeling. We were trained, practiced our Brahms concerto for 20 years to do what? We just did a wonderful piece by Ligeti, where Mysteries of the Macabre, where all the players had to shout and sing and cluck their and actually, after the first 10 minutes of crying with laughter, everybody did it so well. I mean, even managed to sing in tune by the end of it. So, they're kind of up for anything here, if they can be convinced that it's worth doing.
I think his willingness to try everything out, and also to try these really incredibly fiendishly difficult modern pieces with an orchestra that's technically so brilliant. He says if he can't do these pieces with the Berlin Philharmonic, then who can he do them with? And then we have a piece like Tevot by Thomas Ades that really gets you and you think, wow.
He makes a different sort of music, Sir Simon. Some Germans criticized that because they liked the special German sound. But I was rather bored with the last main conductor, Abado. I felt usually cold. And of course, I was very young when Karajan, of course, he was Karajan. But I always say if it's good, I get goose pimples. And most of the time, when I hear anything he's conducting, I get so many goose pimples. Really, well, in love with this Englishman.
He's not an unreachable maestro. He's really a very approachable musician.
Very friendly,
Yeah.
but he's friendly to everybody, but he knows exactly what he wants.
Yeah.
And don't dare not to obey.
He's been known to turn round to the audience during a concert and ask them very politely if they have handkerchiefs to sneeze into, because he says, I know you can hear us as an audience member, but we can also hear you. And he says it with such a charm that no one thinks he's telling them off, but it just makes the audience feel like Simon Rattle has spoken to them, even if it's only to tell them off that they're sneezing too much.
They still cough a lot in concerts, but nothing in comparison to New York, where it's normally you hear more coughing than music. New York is a really noisy city, and it just gets brought into the concert hall. People haven't always, frankly, they haven't learned how to behave. That's a shame, because it's a really great audience, and you have to remember that they're not coughing out of a sense of personal vendetta, but sometimes it feels like it. Oh God, I've learnt a new 10 things every day. With the level of playing individually, I think I would put my hand on my heart and say it's higher than in any other orchestra. But there was always a tradition of that. I mean, we have, for instance, I would say, the two greatest orchestral oboists in the world, the two greatest orchestral horn players in the world, both of whom sound completely different from each other. And so then you get another type of sound. One horn player is a red wine, one is a white wine, but they're both very expensive. The orchestra votes on me. If the orchestra wants it to continue, I will happily continue. But 10 years with an orchestra like this is a relatively short time. I mean, apart from Claudio Abbado, every other conductor was carried out in a box. And as Claudio says to me, well, I tried to die, because he was so ill. So the feeling is that you're in for the long term here, but what that means, who knows?
The piece Just Simon is part of Berlin Without Walls, and it was produced by Kara Oller and Ann Heppermann. The executive producer is Lee Moore Tomer.